Greetings, everyone. This is Rock and Roll Spot Connection with the Weekly Comic Book Roundup, and we got actually a pretty big haul this week. So yeah. Anyway, kicking things off, we've got 10 Deaths of Wolverine #3. Where we left off, the Omega Wolverine was hot on the trail of Moira McTaggart, who had had an attempt made against her by Mystique. Moira had, however, had amputated her techno-organic arm, and yeah. But Krakoa was aware of the Omega Wolverine running around. So we begin with Wolverine, Laura, and Scout on Krakoa talking. And they're interrupted, however, by Xavier, whom Wolverine promptly attacks. Xavier does, however, state that he should know better than to sneak up on any of them, and asks her to forgive him for the intrusion. Lets her know what's going on to a point, showing images from a combination of body cam and security cameras of the Omega Wolverine. And Laura makes the good point of asking, why are you asking me? Wouldn't Logan be better suited for this? But, of course, Logan is indisposed. And Scout volunteers to join in, as Xavier figures it would be best to send a Wolverine in pursuit of a Wolverine. Scout, however, chimes in saying that she thinks Xavier meant to say Wolverines. At the Epiphany campus in Mountain View, California, Arnold Chendikar is about to give the presentation for his big brand launch, but Dolores Ramirez has shown up to basically say, yeah, you can't. You're going to have to cancel this. But they have a tip that he's been targeted. Some of her people outside explain that the call for local police backup has arrived. However, it's not what they expect. Rather, it's the Omega Wolverine, as he did leave the scene of the motel Moira was staying at in a police cruiser. Wolverine wades through the CIA operatives, and Moira escapes, making her way to Chandikar's home in north of San Francisco. And she tells him everything. But the CIA operatives proved no trouble at all for the Omega Wolverine until Laura shows up, and Scout, and Daken. Apparently, Daken had been convinced to come because they thought it might be therapeutic. Hunt down and beat the shit out of some wannabe version of the old man. But Daken states, seeing the way that the Omega Wolverine fights, the way he speaks, the way he smells, it's really him. And Daken refers from his dad, and Wolverine retracts his claws, looks at his daughters and son, and says, explains that none of them make it. And he knows how each of them dies. He collapses, and Daken assumes he's hurt, but Laura looking at him and figures he's sick. Chandikar makes a a new prosthesis for Moira, and the idea basically becomes that the plan becomes transfer her mind into a appears to be a robotic body. Which brings us to a flash forward in year 1000. Wolverine is learned. So, for those who might not remember, in year 1000, Moira was still alive, and her and Wolverine were being kept and preserved, the last surviving mutants. But Moira informs him that the Phalanx is ready to claim the planet, and the time for the ascendancy has come, and that the world will end tomorrow. But Wolverine thought she was dead. After all, he stabbed her. But Moira said that she's been watching him for centuries, and his attempts to escape have always been half-hearted, as if he just gave up. But the thing is, he wants to know, he would want to find out why all this came to pass. She says that she's the reason. And she's been watching him too. And she's been watching too to see the look on Wolverine's face when she kills him. So she can kill the last mutant. Apparently that was the end of one, as he explains, as Omega explains to the kids. That was one story, but the end of one story at the beginning of another. And that is where the issue ends. Okay, bringing it back to year 1000 actually kind of is a nice little callback there. And it's interesting to note that it's actually a future version of Wolverine, not a Phalanx clone or some such. So, also, even though Laura, Gabby, and Dakin are all on Krakoa, we've seen so little interaction between the three of them, and it was nice to get to see them all working together. But I said that I keep saying I'm honestly enjoying 10 Deaths more than 10 Lives. 10 Lives feels disjointed and not a part of anything important, whereas 10 Deaths actually feels like it's an important part of the story. But anyway, moving on to our next book, we've got Amazing Spider-Man number 90. Continuing Spider-Man Beyond. Where we left off, Spider-Man, Peter Parker, had reclaimed his costume and whatnot, and went to take on Queen Goblin after Queen Goblin had already defeated Black Cat, and Ben had just kind of saved Janine and left. So Maxine Danger is wondering just what it is why Ben isn't fighting Queen Goblin. And it's not because of Brain. He realized, basically, he explains he realizes he's been messed with by the Beyond Corporation, and so he's not following their orders anymore. He's not taking orders from them anymore. Janine explains that the drive that was destroyed by Queen Goblin gives evidence that all of the villains that Ben's been facing, they've all been it was all set up by the Beyond Corporation, and that there's a facility on Staten Island where they work on it, where everything is done. She explains it's all been a double cross. Beyond are the ones orchestrating the supervillain program all these months to their own ends. That's where the facility for their Staten Island is where the facility for their supervillain program is, That's why Goblin Queen is what was after what the drive that they took. But it's destroyed before the whistle can be blown. And so, but Ben realizes he knows exactly who it is that can help him deal with the Beyond Corporation. Which brings us to the present, where Peter is facing off against Queen Goblin, and he explains to her that the Goblin thing has kind of been done to death. And Queen Goblin explains that so many goblins in Peter's life, it must frighten him deeply. But Peter states, and yeah, there's some commentary to add to this line, that the X-Men have a way scarier Goblin Queen. Since the character was shown off online, I've been saying, yeah, Goblin Queen's a better name than Queen Goblin. Completely forgetting about Madeline Pryor's alias of Goblin Queen. Yeah. Oops. But apparently Beyond Corporation has terabytes of Spider-Man data, and she sees everything. So she's basically just waiting for Spider-Man to do what she already knows he's going to do, and that's becoming boring. But he continues to follow, and she hits him with her goblin gaze. And he falls into the river. But he's able to come back from the goblin gaze. Remembering things like talking with Ben in the beginning of the story about Ben taking on the role for the Beyond Corporation. And he said, one last thing he said to Ben was, "Be amazing." And he sees Ben saying, "That's just it. We both are. And if I deserve to be Spider-Man, then so do you. Never give up." And Peter gets out of the river and overcomes Goblin Gaze, delivers a devastating uppercut to Queen Goblin, who's glided and picks her up, while the Coast Guard picks up Peter. The Beyond Corporation, they're trying to find Ben, however, and they finally managed to get a lock on him on Staten Island. And but Peter gets to refill his web cartridges, and as the Goblin Queen's crown came off, well, they're finding out, they managed to discover it's a communication device, and there's a what's coming over the communication device is that from Maxine saying that Spider-Man is no longer viable, backup protocol for Staten Island facility. And so that's Staten Island. Peter and Ben meet up. Apparently, the damage that Beyond has done to Ben's memories includes forgetting who Peter Parker is. And so they decide to go after the Staten Island Beyond facility. And that is where the issue ends. With Spider-Man Beyond being great, we're approaching the home stretch at this point. I think over the course of March's issues, we're actually going to be the story itself will be wrapping up. But anyway, Moving on to our next book, which is also a Beyond tie-in, we've got Miles Morales' Spider-Man, number 35. Where we left off, that same facility that Ben and Peter are about to attack was found previously by Miles and his surviving clone, Shift. They've made their way through it, and they've run into the Assessor, who, well, is being the Assessor. Basically, just, the Assessor explains that Assessment Services is an independent entity operating in contractual partnership with several subsidiaries of the Beyond Corporation. Assessment Services oversees a suite of services from asset production to subject stress testing. The Assessor then asks if Miles remembers stress testing, if it affects Miles' sleep, and if Miles wakes up screaming. Shift and Miles destroy the Assessor, but it's just a robot. Another one pops up, which they probably destroy, and, well, yeah. But they go after the servers. They're going after the servers. Apparently, Gank had told Miles that not much can be dug up about the building, about the complex, but it does have crazy power use centralized in an underground spot. And when they make it to the bottom floor, Quantum shows up. And so Miles takes on Quantum, stating that Quantum's moves are predictable now. And the Assessor makes a supplementary note to ask that Quantum's performance metrics are subpar and declining rapidly. With the Assessor adding that Asset Quantum's declining performance metrics may result from being subjected to accelerated disciplinary and motivational measures. Torture. But Miles tells Quantum that Quantum doesn't have to listen to the Assessor. That him and Shift are going to stop him. And that Quantum can step away, and he does. They continue on, and they find what's clearly a server room, and a lot of Assessors. So Shift and Miles go after the Assessors, but they need to get to the central core. Quantum shows up to do what he can to help. And we finally get to see who Quantum is. He explains that he's been for 2 years. The Assessor has made Quantum do whatever the Assessor said. The Assessor and Beyond kept Quantum in a cage like an animal. As he starts to leave, he suggests that Miles check out the black doors. Apparently, they're dimensional. Black doors are dimensional monitors, keeping tabs on what's in different dimensions, like a catalog. While looking through the monitors, though, he discovers that Miles discovers his Uncle Aaron is alive. And so, they step into one of the dimensional portals to find Uncle Aaron. And that is where the issue ends. Good tie-in. I kind of feel like this takes place before what's going on currently in Amazing. So, but anyway, moving on to our next book, we've got the Carnage Forever one-shot. I think it's a one-shot. Yeah, I'm pretty sure it is. So, where we left off with Carnage. Cletus Cassidy was killed during the events of, truly killed, I should say, during the events of Extreme Carnage. The Carnage symbiote made its return in the Extreme Carnage crossover recently, where the symbiote seemed to possess the son of a senator. But Cassidy's physical body was destroyed and separated from the original symbiote. His consciousness endures a codex in the symbiote hive, and he's on the loose and bonded with the Extrembiote, a melding of one of Null's symbiote dragons and Iron Man tech. So we open with a little girl drawing on a sidewalk in front of St. Est's, the orphanage that Cletus Cassidy grew up in. A man comes up and asks what she's doing out there, looks at her drawing, and it's a chalk drawing on the sidewalk of her and her dog Bamf. But the guy suggests that maybe Elsie should little girl should maybe not hang around St. Est's. And she's still drawing into the night. Some drunk 20-somethings show up, or one was a jerk, but yeah. So Elsie goes inside into the remains of St. S, where she comes upon the Carnage symbiote. She goes back to her home. And Dee, her, maybe not necessarily mother, but asks who else he's talking to. Elsie says Cletus. And Frank asks Dee if Dee has seen Bamf. On Wednesday, the guy that came upon Elsie and told her about St. S comes walking by, doesn't see Elsie, but does see a cop and explains, there was a little girl hanging around recently. And the cop says he'll ask around, probably a good idea being nervous. Explains that 3 grad students went missing around there a few nights ago. They found signs of violence on one street over. Explaining it's the kind of violence people don't usually walk away from. Thursday, apparently the wind's blowing and Frank's trying to fix a draft when he finds Bamf, or what's left of Bamf. Elsie comes to see him. And promptly and quickly kills Frank before the symbiote makes its presence known to Dee, setting the place ablaze. The next day, Elsie is out drawing on the sidewalk when Jerry, and we learn his name is, shows up. Turns out Jerry was living at St. S at the same time that Cletus burned the place down. And Elsie starts Carnage out to go after Jerry, which is where the issue ends. We also, however, do have a backup story. At maximum security prison, one of the guards triggers the fire suppression system. However, hiding within the suppression system is none other than the Carnage symbiote, which kills the guards and promptly reconstitutes itself before going to his very specific and well-locked cell. And the occupant of the cell states that the Carnage symbiote must be there just looking for a host. And turns out the cell's occupant is none other than Morris Bench, better known as Hydro Man. And the symbiote explains that Morris is smart, which makes Morris confident and fearless. Apparently, the symbiote explains that Morris had almost everything right. But, and the symbiote explains that, asks if Morris knows the extent of his power. Asking why would he take, and the symbiote asks why would it take Morris for a host when it's only the power he desires? Why bond with him when all he needs to do is pull Morris apart? Which is what he does. And that is where the issue ends, setting the stage for the upcoming Carnage #1. We are apparently Marvel is celebrating the 30th anniversary of Carnage this year. A good one shot, like I said, good stage setting for the upcoming Carnage book. Be interested to see how that ties into certain other related titles. Anyway, we now have we'll now be flashing back to the past for our final book for the moment. Ben Reilly, Spiderman #2. Where we left off, Ben Reilly had been woken up in the middle of the night by a rather unwelcome visitor, the Spider-Man villain known as the Scorpion. So we find out that obviously Scorpion and Ben had a fight. Ben is explaining all this to Dr. Kafka. But the fight led them to the stadium where the original clone story ended. And then a fight in Queens with Spider-Man doing what with Ben doing the Spider-Man thing, saving people from harm. However, Dr. Kafka assures Ben that it couldn't have been Matt Gargan, because Gargan is in Ravencroft in his cell. And then Ben makes a suggestion, okay, well maybe it was a chameleon. However, the chameleon is also in Ravencroft, going through therapy. Monitored around the clock. Barely functional as he's in a fragile, unstable state. But Ben, as Spider-Man, reaches out to Edward Whalen, Dr. Kafka's assistant, also formerly the man-rat known as Vermin. And basically makes a friend. We have an interlude of a couple women out on a date. One of them doesn't really get internet dating. It's kind of weird, and reaches the other one, and her hand turns into a blue claw, and the other woman disappears. Before going to hang out with Edward Whalen, Ben stops off at what was Uncle Ben and Aunt May's house. Keep in mind that at this point in time in Spider-Man's timeline, Aunt May is believed to be dead. Technically, Peter and MJ own the house, but they'll probably eventually sell it. But Ben's got, of course, a ton of memories there. Some good, others not so much. And he thinks about those memories, especially a lot of those memories being memories for Peter's, but yeah. So Edward and Ben get together for a sci-fi double feature at a revival house. The day of the year stood still in Forbidden Planet. As Forbidden Planet ends, one of the writers from the coffee shop is there, sees Ben, says hi, and they starts to kind of just go off. But Ben suggests that John join them. Him and Edward go to the diner up the block to grab a bite. Talking about the themes of the movies, and John dissociates for a moment. And he kind of drifts off in his head sometimes. Always been like that since he was a kid, when suddenly 4 titanium tentacles slam through the window and grab Edward. Again, keeping in mind with the time frame of what's happening, Otto Octavius at this point is also dead, which means it can't be him that's just grabbed Otto, but rather Carolyn Trainer, Lady Octopus, and that is where the issue ends. I'm liking the miniseries. I really am. It's a nice. One has I got out of comics for the majority of pretty much the rest of the '90s, around the time the Clone Saga was beginning. I was kind of sort of keeping up on what was going on, but not actually reading the comics. So it's kind of cool to see stuff from the era, because I do know people who actually think fondly of Ben Reilly's tenure as Spider-Man, and I can see why. I can definitely see why. I recall James DeMatteis, who's writing Ben Reilly's Spider-Man, was writing Amazing Spider-Man at the time. But anyway, that's going to do it for now. As always, feel free to like, share, and subscribe. Links to my Facebook, Twitter, Patreon, and PayPal can be found in the description box down below. This is Rock and Roll Spock signing off, saying live long and rock hard.